Hello and welcome to our podcast from RHB Asset Management. I am Toon, Chief Investment Officer of RHB Equities. In today's episode, I'll be providing an update on the global economy, discuss the possibility of a recession in 2020, and what you as an investor can do to ride through these turbulent times. Currently, there are nearly 1.3 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 spread over 200 countries since the first case was recorded in Wuhan, China, back in December of 2019. The COVID-19 virus has currently resulted in over 66,000 deaths. While the virus was mostly contained within China at the start of 2020, the number of cases across the globe have skyrocketed over the recent weeks. The number of confirmed cases in the United States, Italy, Spain, and Germany have all exceeded China. The pandemic has also caused severe global, social, and economic disruptions. This has sparked fears of an impending global recession. Key stock indices such as the S&P 500 have recorded some of its worst performances since the 2008 global financial crisis. In an attempt to mitigate the spread of this highly contagious virus, governments across the world have enforced travel restrictions and placed its citizens under lockdown. Currently, it is estimated that 1.7 billion people, or roughly 20% of the global population, have been ordered to remain at home as government adopt extreme measures in an attempt to protect their citizens. The initial ground zero of COVID-19 pandemic, China, has enforced the largest quarantine ever seen in human history. At its peak, the lockdown covered 760 million people across 20 cities, bringing the country's economy to a literal standstill. All aspects of normal life were halted. Currently, the US has become the epicenter of the pandemic with over 300,000 confirmed cases, nearly twice as many as China. There are now more than 8,000 COVID-19 deaths in the US. US President Donald Trump announced on March 30th that he will extend federal guidelines such as social distancing and working from home protocols until April 30th. He also urged Americans to brace for a significant lockdown. This comes after White House experts warning that the pandemic could kill as many as 200,000 people in the US alone. There's also a travel ban restricting the entry of non-US citizens traveling from various countries. On 23rd March, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced a nationwide police-enforced lockdown, where people would only be allowed outside to buy food or medication, exercise alone once a day, or to travel to work if absolutely necessary. All essential shops will be closed with immediate effect. Italy is also in a lockdown from mid-March, restricting travel, leisure, work, and other aspects of life for its 60 million citizens. Spain and France shortly follow suit, ordering residents to remain in their home. More recently, just last Friday, 3rd April, Singapore announced that it will close schools and most workplaces for at least a month in response to a new surge in COVID-19 cases in Singapore. Singapore had basically cut out most of its links to the outside world a month ago. Its aggressive testing and contact tracing efforts had meant that internally, within Singapore at least, life has been allowed to continue somewhat normally. But now it appears that with the recent spike in cases, Singapore is implementing more drastic social distancing measures as well, if only for a period of time. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to spread, nationwide lockdowns were imposed. Key global manufacturing and finance hub grinded the global economy to a screeching halt. It was abundantly clear that we are edging closer to a global recession. With many countries' economies already slowing down before the pandemic, COVID-19 poses a serious risk of tipping most of them into recession. In fact, The managing director of the IMF, International Monetary Fund, officially declared that the global economy is now in a recession during a news conference on Friday, 27 March. As a result of the pandemic, in March alone, 3.2 million Americans have already lost their jobs. The Federal Reserve estimates a total employment reduction of 47 million jobs during the pandemic, which would translate to an unemployment rate of 32%. However, it is hoped that this plunge in employment numbers would be short-lived. In response to this crisis, governments and central banks all over the world have enacted massive fiscal and monetary stimulus measures to counteract the disruptions caused by COVID-19. For example, on 25th March, the US Senate approved the largest relief bill in history to combat the negative economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The US dollar 2 trillion bill would provide up to US dollar 1,200 in direct relief for American adults and US dollar 500 per child. This package is significantly larger than the US dollar 800 billion stimulus bill that was passed in 2008 during the GFC. But it would seem that this is only the first of a series of measures to stabilize a US economy that is on a downward spiral. In addition, the US Federal Reserve also announced that it is dropping its benchmark interest rates to between 0 to 0.25%. Along with its slashing of benchmark interest rate, the Fed is also cutting emergency discount window rates for banks by 125 bips to 0.25%. There was also a massive US dollar 700 billion quantitative easing program. The Fed's action was regarded as the largest single-day set of moves it has ever taken. However, unlike many countries, China has yet to implement massive stimulus measures. But with its output crippled by factory shutdowns and transport curbs this quarter, China's economy is now threatened further by a collapse in external demand due to the spread of COVID-19 around the world. Finally, it was announced in late March that China will increase its fiscal deficit as a percentage of its GDP, issue special sovereign debt, and allow local governments to sell more infrastructure bonds as a part of a package to stabilize the economy. While currently there are no signs of stopping COVID-19 dead in its track in the immediate future, there are still lots of reasons to hope that given time and the right measures implemented by the different governments globally, the situation could improve and investor confidence would return. The key to recovery is whether countries are able to slow down the spread of COVID-19. And for that, we can look at two successful examples of recovery in China and Korea. On March 28, China lifted its 2-month lockdown on the city of Wuhan, the ground zero for COVID-19, and declared victory over the pandemic. The Chinese claimed that the virus was fully contained after the city reported no new cases for 7 days. While there could be doubts to the authenticity of the claims, there's plenty of evidence that suggests that China has managed to gain the upper hand in its fight against the virus. Notably, the Chinese President Xi Jinping himself visited Wuhan on March 10th. To combat the virus, China embarked on one of the largest mass mobilization efforts in history, closing all schools, forcing millions of people inside their own homes, quickly building more than a dozen huge temporary hospitals, deploying thousands of extra medical staff to Wuhan and the surrounding Hubei province. They also tested and traced everyone who may have encountered the virus. Authorities went door to door for health checks, forcibly isolating every resident with symptoms, no matter how mild, in makeshift hospitals and temporary shelters. Elsewhere in China, facial recognition software linked to a compulsory phone app that color-coded people based on their contagion risk. And while these measures may seem draconian from a Western perspective, it was a systematic, coordinated, and comprehensive response that ultimately delivered positive results. Still, given that much of the Western culture is based on individualism and an emphasis of human liberties, it is unlikely that the Chinese way would receive widespread approval. For a more democratic response, we should shift our attention to show how South Korea responded to COVID-19. Initially, one of the worst hit countries by the virus, the response from South Korea government has drawn widespread approval across the world, where the numbers of confirmed cases have plummeted over recent days. The death rate of less than 1% remains one of the lowest in the world. The South Korean response was fast, effective, and highly technologically driven. At the forefront of the country's response to the pandemic was its aggressive testing and transparency. South Korea has the capacity to test over 20,000 people per day. As at end March, South Korea tested 3,692 people per million, compared to 23 per million people in the United States. Technology was also at the forefront of the country's fight against the virus. Authorities and startups were given access to a wide range of information resources to track the spread of the virus and develop solutions to fight it. Case information and movement of infected people were also shared with the public through an interactive website and smartphone apps. All these measures allowed Korea to flatten the curve in less invasive ways. Unlike the 2008-2009 global financial crisis, which resulted from a total collapse of the financial system after a decade of poor financial decisions, the 2020 recession is primarily linked to the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Businesses didn't shut down because of a slowdown in the economy. They were told to shut down by their governments in the midst of a booming economy. Similarly, consumers didn't stop spending or lose confidence because they were afraid for their jobs. They were asked to stay at home by the government. It is easy to forget that just a week prior to the stock market plunge in February, that the three key US indices hit record highs. We at RHB Asset Management are hopeful that once the spread of the virus begins to slow, and as new vaccines, treatments, and medication enter the market, it will slowly put an end to the investor panic. We are of the view that there will be a sharp contraction globally in second quarter of 2020, with disruptions from the virus persisting well into third Q, resulting into a soft third quarter 2020 as well. We expect a rebound of activity in fourth quarter of 2020 and into 2021. However, even with the rebound, the level of output at the end of 2021 will be below its pre-recession levels. We are now entering into uncertain times, and it can be said that the COVID-19 pandemic is happening on an unprecedented scale, with market volatility at levels not seen since 2008 and 2009. It is key that investors stay calm and avoid making rash decisions. While this COVID-19 pandemic is scary and is a first for many of us, it is not the first pandemic or the global recession that mankind has ever seen. Throughout history, mankind has prevailed, and we will do so again. But more importantly, after each such episode, the world would not be the same ever again. There will be a new normal, and this time will be no different. For us at RHB Asset Management, we are already thinking of the new normal and how we should be investing in these new normal trends going forward. For example, many companies now have most employees working from home. We suspect that many will probably continue doing so after the pandemic is over. Some companies will no longer want expensive office space. Technology needs of companies will change dramatically after this episode. The world is certainly going to change our supply chain and bring manufacturing closer to their home bases. This is going to happen everywhere in the world. Hopefully, this won't end globalization, but it will certainly change it. These are some of the key themes that we are already investing in for many of our flagship funds. We are happily picking up great stocks that we really like at great prices. For us, this is once in a decade sale. Like what Warren Buffett said, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. And with that, we have come to the end of our podcast. Thank you for listening. Stay healthy and keep safe. Thank you very much.